Farmers today are facing rising costs, volatile markets, and extreme weather. The A Better Way to Farm podcast digs into strategies to help you take control of farm inputs and maximize profit so your farm can thrive for generations. Remember to take advantage of our free resources at abetterwaytofarm.com. Now, from America's Heartland, here's your host. Hey, friend. Thank you for tuning in and welcome back to the A Better Way to Farm podcast. I am your host, Tyler, National Field Agronomist on the team. And we have another great episode coming at you today. We're actually going to highlight a client's journey, kind of give you a quick update on how our system has increased their yields, decreased their cost of production, and really ultimately allowed them to share their success with other growers from across the country. Will you please help me in welcoming from the great state of Wisconsin, Mr. Dan Phillips. Dan, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for joining us. How's everything going?
Thank you. And everything's going great up here. A little extra moisture than normal, but I'll take it over a dry year we had last year.
Yeah, we were just kind of talking about that a little off air. And that's one of the things that we started out. I thought we were going to have plenty of moisture, and now we're really starting to dry up. And I know that not only did you have a fantastic field day just recently, but you have caught quite the stretch of precipitation. I think you said you've had over an inch in the last few days, haven't you?
We had an inch on Tuesday night through Tuesday morning. The week before that was dry, and then we had 4 inches that other week. And we're pushing on I think something like 30 inches for the growing season.
That is absolutely fantastic. And I know that it's one thing that we're going to dive into it a little bit, but I would imagine that you're very thankful that you've been working with us as a client and as a representative. But I'd imagine that some of the things that you're doing now, you're really going to reap the rewards of it come harvest with all of that rainfall that you've gotten.
Yes, corn looks phenomenal. I mean, there's some holes that we just had too much water, but otherwise, for the most part, we're looking at probably one of the best corn crops we've ever grown.
Oh, man, that's awesome. That is fantastic. And it's exciting, but in order to kind of get where we're going, we've got to know where we've come from. You have done this before. We've talked about this before. So for the listener out there that's just tuning in, if you'd like to go back and find Dan's story, you absolutely can. We kind of dive a little deeper into the beginning of it. But ultimately, Dan, for those guys that don't know, your starting point with us, what was really that driving factor that you said, you know what, I just can't keep farming the way I'm farming. I've got to reach out to A Better Way to Farm. What was it that really just drove you into reaching out to us?
Well, some of it had to do with we're always trying to look for something new to try and do. And, people talk about these high yields, and we were at a plateau. I mean, we just couldn't seem like we tried pushing more nitrogen. Oh, that's going to be the key. Oh, you got to push more nitrogen more because we're, to get to the higher yields. So you got to have, a pound of nitrogen for a bushel. And we tried that. That there's a threshold on that.
Yes.
But, and then a couple other things that caught my attention was I said, we got to do something different. We go and we'd take trees out of fence lines and stuff like that. And that ground was just as tilthy and as black and as beautiful as you could imagine. And you go over 3 feet and get off of that, and it was worked and it was hard. And it's like, why is that ground so much better than what's in the fence line? Well, because obviously we're doing something wrong. And that was some stuff that I was really looking for. What we're doing wrong? Why are we doing it wrong? And that's kind of how that's how I kind of reached out. We're always looking for something.
And to me, it's always interesting that a lot of people will say, well, I'm happy with the yields I have. So, I'm not interested in, higher yields. There are other people that think that, no, I don't want to do any extra because it's going to cost me extra money. And there are absolutely, growers that will sit there and think, oh, you know what? I'm just trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong, if anything. And we work with growers in every aspect of their operation. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're just looking for a little bit of help. Maybe you are trying to grow, record yields. We absolutely work with those growers too. But I mean, we have such a range of clients that we work with. It's a pretty unique what we do with the industry. I always talk about, we have these fundamentals of agronomy programs, and I'm blessed enough to help out and present at some of those. And that's one of the things that I say all the time is that what we do is not magic. It's just backed by science, and we just go through the science of the things. And that's where we can help kind of show, hey, you know what? We don't want to say that you're doing it wrong, but there may be a better way to do it. And that's where, growers like yourself come on board. Ultimately, one of the first things that we would highly recommend, and I know this is something that you have really taken with and ran with, is soil testing. We say, hey, get your account opened up so we can get your information and we can start working with you, start doing some soil tests and take a look at that. I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but I do want to talk about kind of our comprehensive soil test. Again, it's not different than what you can do out there. Just most people don't, because it's a more expensive option. But in your eyes, Dan, what's the kind of the key benefit or benefits of our soil testing system and kind of the way we make recommendations?
Well, the biggest thing there is, we're not just going at the blind approach like we used to. We got a spelled out map. I mean, it's like, I guess my biggest analogy to that would be, well, I'm gonna go drive down to Arizona, take away my phone, take away the map, and tell me to drive to Arizona. If you even get rid of the signs and tell me to get there, you ain't gonna get there, I guess.
Right.
I mean, I got an idea, but I might end up on the West Coast before I find out that I got to go back, or even to try to get there.
Yeah, and how much more comfortable are you reading a soil test, especially our soil test, now versus I think you've been with us. I think we talked about this a little bit, but you've been with us now for about 4 years. I think you've been with the system 100% with the system for the last 2 years. But in the last 4 years, how improved has your ability increased to read those soil tests?
Oh, tremendously. I don't know. You once you start and you do the system and you're like, oh, okay, well now we could do something else, or read, or what am I missing? You kind of want to learn about it too. It's not like, oh, well, okay. I mean, I go back and I'm like, oh, I got a question. I'll go back, I'll pull a soil test out, and on the bottom it gives you a nice couple things that are there. Well, how much we can do of this or that, or some of the ratios that we need. But then I'll also go back and I'll follow Rod's 12 days of nutrients. Maybe not this year's. Maybe I'll pull up last year's, to get something a little different, because he does it different every year.
Yep.
So, I mean, it makes you want to learn and to do better.
Yeah, and that is ultimately, we get, because we get the question all the time, right? You get the question all the time. Oh man, I've got to take 2 days out of my week, out of my month, out of my year to go to this agronomy class. I always call it an event, right? 2 days, a fundamental of agronomy event, because to me, it's not a class. It's not something that you just go to and you're like, man, these guys are forcing me to go to. We don't force anybody really to go to it, but we just know how good that program is. And we learn about soil testing, how to read that soil test. Our recommendation in our soil test that comes back to you, the grower, is very easy to read. We put notes out there. We give tips and tricks. Again, it's nothing that we're doing that's, magic. It's all based off of science. And then we go into the, just ultimately, I'm going to say better agronomy, cleaner inputs. Talk us through a little bit about, how you're still using potassium, but how has some of the inputs changed from 4 years ago till now? What does that look like, especially as it relates to how much cleaner the products are?
So our inputs, I guess that's a loaded question. So your cost per bushel is down. I mean, we might be spending the same amount of money as we were before, but we're trying to do better. I mean, if we want to cut our costs, yeah, we could do that, and we could grow the same as what we were doing before. But I don't know. I always try to do better, and our cost per bushel is definitely went down. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we've cut our nitrogen. Yeah, that's been one of our biggest ones.
Do you happen to know your numbers right off the top of your head? Or, and I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't, or even if you do and you don't want to share, I don't want to put you on the spot.
We're going to be, if doing some walking in the fields, I'm hoping to be 0.7 utilization or better, depending on what we can pull on some of these fields.
Yep. For your nitrogen utilization.
Yep. That's what my goal is. I'm hoping maybe it's a little bit better. And that's on a wet year. I mean, we ended up putting a little bit more nitrogen than I anticipated and planned on. We were going to have, on our corn acres, we were going to be at 180 units. That was my intended plan. We put on our 30 units, we'll be at 210.
So you better be raising like 400 bushel corn, man.
Well, water was kind of a killer on that. We could have spoon fed it maybe a little bit more throughout the year, a little bit or whatever, but I don't like driving out there either.
Yeah, and that's one of those strategies, because I give the nitrogen section, and I get so many questions about nitrogen, and it is very, very grower dependent, based on your situation. If you're going to go out there, if you can only go out there, one time in the year, that's going to change things. It's going to make it more difficult to get to a 0.5 or a 0.4 or even a 0.3 nitrogen use efficiency, but that's what works in your operation. And there are other methods that you could use. Are going to go out there and early season wide drop, or early season side dress, or late season side dress. Maybe you look at something like a wide drop so that you can take advantage of some of those efficiencies. And as it relates to efficiencies, Dan, and kind of a little bit about your story, I don't want to hit on it too hard, but I know that you have a very interesting story. We had a situation where, for your own reasons, which we all appreciate, you decided, hey, you know what? I don't know if this is for me. I'm going to kind of pull back a little bit, take a step back, and try to regroup and, see what this looks like in the future. Can you kind of walk us through that strategy and why you decided, hey, I need to pull back a little bit? And then what happened that you realized, no, that was the mistake. I need to go full force. And like I said, now you've been 100% with us for the last 2 years.
So we went and we pulled back because we had some other dollars tied up in another product. It was sustaining and not moving forward. And we weren't putting no micronutrients on or nothing like that. And we pulled that back and we left it on one field, the complete system here. And we had a 44 bushel difference on corn. Well, let me tell you, when the grain markets puke, 44 bushel, and to go with that, the cost wasn't even $44 an acre difference. Like to go to change this, it was, we're talking 30, and to get 44 bushel, that's the difference of staying in a business is getting out. When the grain prices get like this.
Yeah. And I really hope, if you're listening to this and that's you're wondering, holy smokes, I'm hoping I can sell my corn for $3.50. The grain markets have absolutely tanked. Do you want to be sitting there wishing, maybe you should have done that for another 44 bushels? We have a lot of clients that come in there, and Dan, they're in the same position that you're in. They say, well, you're doing this extra stuff. I just want to stick to the basics. We relate it to hitting the easy button, like the Staples commercial or whatever, where you hit the easy button and away you go. But, really, if you take a little bit of time and you address some of the limiting factors, we can absolutely build a program that cost wise mimics what you were doing. I know I had another grower reach out to me earlier in the week, and they said, all right, you know what? I'm sick of these prices. And I know we've talked about your system and your program and going all liquid. It scares me. I have this fear of change, but I've got to do something different. And he's like, so how much is your program? And I'm like, well, that's not what our program is about. It isn't a price per acre. What we do is we try to find that budget and work within your budget. And what we do is we balance out things, especially like micronutrients, so that we can address those limiting factors and kind of go from there. And another step that we do, one of the things that you just started doing, is we preach foliar feeding. A lot of people talk about how foliar feeding doesn't work. Foliar feeding absolutely works. And that's something that you've implemented into your program to the point that you've got a drone. So do you want to kind of talk about kind of, in the last few years, what kind of drove you to that application method?
Well, So we went to the foliar feeding, and we're trying to push yield, and we want to make that plant as healthy as we can throughout the entire growing season. As we were foliar feeding this year, where we really will go back a little bit, when we first did the foliar feeding and that, I seen it on the beans and I seen it on the winter wheat. And that was kind of like, oh, okay. Well, this year is the first year we did it on the corn. And we foliar fed. Foliar fed at V4. We foliar fed, and then we got kind of caught. Some of our corn was, V8, V10, and some of it was a little bit closer to 11, 12, and we were taking tissue samples. And when we did in the beginning, we were trying to get some tissue samples, and we made some adjustments. We seen that we were short on boron, and we were only going to put out, what the soil test was calling for. Well, with the wet weather, we know that that's negatively charged, so we're losing it. So we went and we added some more. We changed that. We made that adjustment right off the bat. Then we turned around. We came back at V8 to V10, in there, and we were foliar feeding. We took tissue samples, and we were still showing up a little bit deficient on things. And in between there, we ended up buying a drone because we got so wet. We couldn't get out in the fields. Like, it was like, we want to do this, but we can't get out there. So we went out and bought a drone. Our plan was to eventually buy one. It wasn't really planned on this year, but the way that everything's kind of going, that's the way it went. And the other thing I like about it is there's no more wheel tracks. Once we do that, we cut out the wheel tracks. And, you're wondering, are you really getting that in the plant? So we took them tissue samples, and we were deficient in some stuff. It was telling us we needed and that's just a Snapchat of what we have, and it's telling us we're a pint low on zinc and maybe 2 pints of manganese and a pint or 2 of boron or something. And we went out there and foliar fed that on, and we came back at tassel as we put some fungicide on. And I'm like, well, let's see if we're where we're at. Let's see where we're sitting. And our soil test still said that we should be putting some on. So what we did, we still went according to our recommendation on our soil test. We got them levels where we needed them to be, and had almost a picture perfect tissue sample at tassel. Well, if we would have never put them micro, I couldn't even imagine how deficient it would have looked. That drone at 2 gallons to the acre, we were able to do that. So it didn't just all of a sudden find it and it was there. We drove it into the plant with the drone, and we were able to achieve that. And I'm excited for fall, what that's going to bring to have, have your zinc levels and your manganese and your boron and everything where it need to be at tassel and starting going into cob fill. I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised. I mean, we had a little touch of that on the field day on weights of the cobs. It's pretty neat.
Well, and so I want you to share, if you want to share one of your own stories, that's fantastic. But I know that you've actually joined our team on the sales and marketing side as well. And you're actually working with growers yourself. I know that you had a grower up in North Dakota raising some wheat. And what kind of experience did he have using this program on his wheat?
He was able to pull a 64.3 test weight on his wheat. And he was telling me that they're hearing at the elevator, they're hearing a lot of poor quality around them. So 60-pound test weight is your normal, and they went up to 64.3. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Some of the things that we can do, obviously, Mason very well. Mason's phenomenal. I was talking to him just the other day, and he has basically went away from using fungicide because we understand plant health. We understand that a healthier plant, healthier soils is going to push through some of the disease pressure that comes in. I'm going to share this and hopefully to the listener that's listening, if they haven't reached out to us, if they haven't pulled the trigger and joined the team, I want to tell you this specifically, that excess nitrogen in your corn plant or in any plant will actually induce disease faster. That's not anything that I came up with. That's information that I learned years and years and years ago from a very intelligent man that got that information from some research. And it's one of the reasons why I strongly recommend pulling back on nitrogen. Fall applied anhydrous, it's going to be tough for you to get less than 0.8, 0.7 pounds of nitrogen per bushel produced just because of the nature of the beast. If you're willing to put nitrogen on at planting or even do it later, you can absolutely spoon feed that crop the right amount of nitrogen. And then you can do things like spend more money on, micronutrients where you wouldn't have traveled before and done some of those things, or maybe look at buying a drone because you have a few extra dollars in your pocket. And then you can really start to see the changes that we can make to your operation. Now, you've alluded to it a little bit, Dan, but as we start to kind of wrap up this episode, where have you seen your farming operation improve over the last 4 years?
Our plant health, our plant health, we've spent more dollars on micronutrients that we never did before. We used to put the old dry product Aspire on. Oh, you got a half pound of boron. That's all you need. That's not even close to what.
Not even close.
We were listening to co-op on that, and it was like, we used to dump on 200, 250 pounds of potash, 200, 250 pounds of phosphorus, depending on the field. Oh, we got to build that. Well, how about we just drive the plant we're got and let that recycle and, build bigger roots and all that. That's where we're at.
Yep. Yeah. And you talked about it before is that, maybe in some cases, maybe your dollar that you're spending isn't what it was. Maybe you're spending a few bucks more. I'll be completely honest with you. If you bought groceries recently, you're spending a lot more on groceries than what you used to. But ultimately, the nice thing is about what we do with our system is that it may cost a little bit more, or maybe it costs the same. Ultimately, the return is what we're after, and we're getting greater returns. That's where you talked about your cost of production. Your cost per bushel produced is drastically lower. I know that I talked with some growers at the beginning of this year, including land rent, and most of them don't have operating notes because they're able to make enough that way. But their cost of production is $3 a bushel. That's absolutely unheard of. And unfortunately, we know some growers that may be up $4.50, $5 a bushel. And when corn is $3.50, it's pretty dang rough to make a go of it. So, Dan, what advice to that listener out there that hasn't reached out, that's like, I enjoy the podcast, I love listening to them, or I follow Rod or the team on social media, but they have not reached out yet. What advice do you have for those listeners today?
What advice do I have? I guess don't be afraid to try something new, and don't say it won't work on your farm. Because if you're going to have that kind of closed mind, you're right, it won't work because you don't want it to work. That would be my biggest thing. Look what you can do. Are you going to get on your first deal 50 bushel more? No, but your cost of production maybe went from, say, just to grow that bushel went down 50 cents a bushel or something to that nature. Or, I don't know, but there's always something that seems to change and you end up with something a little bit better.
Yeah, that's absolutely great advice, Dan. To me, that's something that, I'll probably be talking about it a lot, but I'm coming up on 10 years with the A Better Way to Farm team. There's just a few of us when I started. Now the team has expanded greatly. And that's the biggest thing is that, man, if you are living in fear of what harvest is going to be or what next year's going to bring, because you don't know if you're going to have the funds, because you don't have the crop, reach out to us. There's nothing there that, no obligation or, just to reach out and say hi and have a chat with one of the team members. We do have some expectations if you do want to join the team, but it starts with a simple 2-day fundamentals of agronomy event that, is probably within driving distance. We don't start them up until the winter time. So you have time to harvest and kind of think about that stuff.
They're all in driving distance. Just get in the car and drive. I'm pretty sure you guys all drive them all.
Yeah, most of them. The problem is you start flying to them. The weather in the wintertime is terrible. So Most of the time flights get canceled and it's a pain in the butt anyway. It's a lot easier to drive. Yeah. So, Dan, thank you very much, man, for your advice today. Thanks for the chat, brother. You've become a great friend in the last 4 years. It's been fantastic to see your progression, not only on your own operation, but what you're doing for us with the Better Way to Farm. So, again, thank you very much for the time and appreciate all your thoughts.
Not a problem. Appreciate being on.
If you're listening to this still and you have that desire, that thirst for knowledge, and you want more out of what you got, please take the time to reach out to us. We absolutely thank you for tuning into this podcast. And we just want to thank you so very much from the bottom of our heart for tuning in and for supporting the Better Way to Farm team. We thank you again for tuning in, and we hope that you have a better day.